Welcome back to the Nate Wenke Podcast, everyone. And today my guest is Adam Tucker, and I appreciate you coming on. And how about you tell us a little bit about what you do and what's going on in the world of Adam Tucker?
So Adam Tucker, what I do, I own some businesses. I've owned a lot of different kinds of businesses over the year, but I think today we're talking about cannabis. So we're here to talk about the dispensary, the grow, the processing center, and I guess all the nuances of the industry and current status of legalities and such. But I'm no expert of any one area of that. I'm just a business guy that owns a retail shop in a place in Michigan. So
Fair enough.
yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. I don't think we need to be experts, which is the good news. We can still just talk about things and explore the complexities of things, and that is a point that I kind of want to highlight here at the beginning, which is that this is a very nuanced topic that requires probably 50 podcasts, not just one, but we can give a crack at it and see what we can kind of investigate here. But not only is the topic in and of itself nuanced, but each individual person is going to have a different background with marijuana, and they're also going to have different reactions to it. And with everything, it has to be treated appropriately with respect and within the individual nuances of that individual person. So that's very important to kind of outline here. A lot of people have some questions about, like, what is THC? What is CBD? What is the difference between edibles and ingesting marijuana versus smoking marijuana? And those are some interesting things to get into. So you want to quick touch on like CBD versus THC?
Yeah, so CBD is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid. I forget how many actual cannabinoids there are. I want to say like 90 some odd cannabinoids that actually affect you as they would classify a drug affects you. THC is obviously the one that got all the attention. THC Delta 9 specifically is what, in the 60s, the hippies and the whatnots. Smoking marijuana is basically decarboxylating a bunch of THC acids and inhaling it in your lungs, which is Delta 9 converted THC. And that is a psychoactive form of THC. You also have Delta 8 that's had a lot of attention lately. A lot of gas stations, unlicensed places have been able to carry Delta 8 until recently.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So, lots of cannabinoids. All the THCs tend to affect you psychoactively. I got heavily involved during the rollout of the medical days. So, I'm definitely more interested in the medical benefits of it. The recreational thing is a new one lately. With recreational, most people are focused on the Delta 9 THC. So,
yep, that's the big one.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to quick move your mic just a little bit closer?
Yeah, sure. Oh, there we go.
Cool, perfect. Sounds a little better.
All right.
Yeah. So, 90, around 90, I think, something like that. What you're saying, different cannabinoids, and a lot of people don't realize that. THC is kind of the hot button one, and then CBD is kind of close behind. But yeah, the big difference is THC is psychoactive, CBD is not. And then there's a bunch of complexities within the other 90 cannabinoids. And then what's the difference between ingested marijuana versus inhaling smoked marijuana? This is a big one that a lot of people I don't think realize.
Yeah, so that's one that, to tell you the truth, I wish I grew up in marijuana, nowadays versus... it's been about 20 years now for me. Back when I first got involved, it was for medical reasons, but the only way you could really figure out how to use cannabis was you buy it by the bag and you either roll it in a paper and smoke it, or you shove it in a pipe and smoke it. There's, you can try to make some crunchy brownies, but nowadays there is a lot more forms of cannabis. You can get gummies, chocolates, hard candies, topicals, sublinguals, tinctures. There's a million other ways to consume it other than smokers. However, the Delta, the psychoactive part, a lot of people, when you talk to people about edibles, it seems like people are pretty polarized on, ooh, I've tried it once, I'll never try it again. It was way too strong. A lot of times it's a party kind of situation, and they're, typically at parties, you're not at a party, and people are known to encourage you to undertake. So, a lot of times I think people are encouraged to take too much the first time that they try an edible. The problem with an edible is it does take about an hour for it to kick in.
Yep.
But the truth is, I feel like it's got to be out there for you, right? Because like you're not inhaling your lungs, and the first sign of my body that even still after 20 years of trying to smoke this stuff, you cough every time. So I kind of there's a lot of studies that show that even the act of like smoking and inhaling smoke into your lungs kind of reduces your coughing reflex, and in your older age, being able to cough is kind of important to prevent pneumonia and that sort of stuff. So I do spend a lot of time. Anytime I talk publicly, I do try to encourage people to try edibles, supplements, topicals, anything but smoking. Now, I will say 80% of our sales are smokeless, so it's still the most popular way to consume, and I think the biggest reason is it's a little more instantaneous, and you kind of know what you're getting as you're ingesting it. So I think, especially for new people, that might be a better way to find your dosage, but still. There's definitely a social aspect to smoking, where people sit around in a circle and pass it around and they're talking and that sort of thing. That doesn't really happen with edibles, and the same thing could be said with recreational use of alcohol or similar social drugs. But that's a much bigger topic than just cannabis. For me, cannabis definitely. In comparison to alcohol, with alcohol, a lot of people don't realize they can actually die from withdrawal if you get used to consuming so much every day, right? Cannabis hasn't been proven yet on any level. There's a lot of studies finally every day and more and more.
True.
I don't think we'll really understand it all in my lifetime, but I do think my future vision of cannabis purchasing will probably be in the aisles of Walmart produce section. I think it's really going to be the next superfruit, and someday people are going to look at you funny if you try to smoke it.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? The change of culture over time is quite crazy. And we're witnessing it right now in a rather drastic fashion. And one other thing that I wanted to touch on with the difference between ingesting versus smoking is when you ingest marijuana, there's a completely different set of biological processes that takes place. Specifically, you noted the delay, which is part of it. And what happens is instead of THC, a chemical called 11-hydroxy is released, and that is far more psychoactive than THC, and some people would even compare it to psilocybin or LSD in terms of it's further towards that camp than I think what a lot of people give it credit for. And I think that might be part of the reason why if you try THC or you try marijuana for the first time and it's in edible form, you may have a much more dramatic experience than you signed up for. And there's that delay factor. And I've heard from a lot of people, and it's as common as they think it's not working, and then they end up taking more, thinking that it's not working when in fact it just hasn't hit you yet, and then they end up on a much more wild ride than they signed up for. So I think that's also interesting that there's actually a different set of chemicals that's released with ingesting marijuana. So that's an interesting point.
And just so you're aware, like Delta, right? That means change. There's all these Delta forms of THC, right? A lot of it is there's 9, 8, 7, there's 10. As far as Delta changes go, but they all start with the THC acids. And if you actually test the plant itself, It's full of THC acids and very little converted THC at all. That's actually a process that your body converts it into, or it's one of the Delta 8, 9, 10 that's typically done by heat through decarboxylation, right?
Okay.
So when you heat up THC acids, that's what turns it into the Delta form. That's what makes it undergo the changes, the chemical changes.
Yeah, it's that heat.
Realign the chain. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting to know. Yeah. So that's some good background on like the substances and the chemicals within them. One thing I wanted to bring up was this all-encompassing label of drugs, and how I think it's one of those terms that has been so overused and applied to nearly everything that it seemed to have lost some of its true meaning. And one definition that I found that was useful was that it's basically any substance that alters your mood, perception, or consciousness. And I think that that's a good starting place, at least for a definition. Of course, if you look up the definition, you'll find about 50 different other versions. But phrases like drugs are bad, it's so simplistic that I think it misses the point royally. And when you include stuff like, something like fentanyl and then CBD in the same category of drug, I think we're really doing a disservice to the nuances and complexities of the individual substances under this umbrella. What do you think about that, and where does marijuana fit into that definitional process?
We all, I grew up in the 80s, right? So
Yep.
I grew up heavy dare time, right? Dare was a big thing. The war on drugs was pretty hot and heavy throughout the 80s, 90s.
Yep.
Started lifting. California legalized 99 for medical. Drugs, I mean, to me, I heard you, I think the three definitions you said kind of, describe your mental state when you take a drug. But, I think it is important to remember, NSAIDs, over-the-counter Tylenol is a drug, right?
Yep.
I don't know of any psychoactive problems or psychoactive effects or any, I'm not aware of any, it's an anti-inflammatory, much like CBD, right?
Yeah.
However, CBD is definitely more effective on some levels for some types of, inflammations. But no pharmacist, right? I do think that as an adult, you should be able to research and find, if you have an ailment, or as much as you would walk into a pharmacy to find a Benadryl tablet, or any of the allergy drugs, Tylenol versus Aleve or whatever. I think cannabis is one of those things that, in many cultures, many countries, it's been kind of used as an over-the-counter drug. It's been used by dentists as a local anesthesia in the past. It's got a long history of drug use, medical purpose drug, right? The definition I grew up with of the drug was it's not food, right? But it's something you ingest into your body, but it changes you chemically somehow, right? So caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, those are, tend to be more of the socially acceptable, I guess if you're going to say recreational drug use, but a use of a substance that does change your state of being, right?
Yep.
I think anything in excess, though, food, I used to be 200 pounds heavier, so food can be bad for you. Inactivity can be bad for you. Too much activity can be bad for you, right? Some drugs could be bad for some people. Some drugs can be good for other people, right? I do think it's down to a personal decision. Back in 2007 when Michigan passed medical, all the way up through 2018 when we finally passed recreational, there was this whole time of like, I was working in a clinic and just seeing these people that, they're either underinsured, they can't afford chemotherapy. Those are the people who tote marijuana as a cure for cancer. And I think they're a little loony. There's some studies there, right?
Sure.
But the bigger thing is, it was a cheaper alternative to people who did not have insurance and coverage for treatment of pain, hunger, appetite loss, sleeping. It's a much more affordable route than if you don't have insurance and you need those kind of drugs to make you comfortable with a chronic, end of life kind of situation. And the cool thing is, you don't actually overdose on it. It doesn't cause asphyxiation and
all that nasty
so,
stuff.
Right? Yeah, all that.
Yeah,
those bad things on the way up.
Oh man.
So, that's my stance on drug use. I mean, Portugal, Spain, there's a few other countries that they're rather lenient on personal consumption, right? And I do think that's the right way to treat it. Is if somebody's having a problem, say they stumbled into the substance that's just not right for them and they can't seem to stop themselves, provide them medical care. Don't lock them up, right?
Yeah.
Keep them in their job, keep them in their home, keep them with their family, help them find medical attention to get off of that sort of substance. Cannabis itself, scientifically so far, right, they show that it's not really addictive on any kind of chemical level. It's not. It doesn't form a dependency.
Yeah.
As far as we're aware, within the the subculture of cannabis, you hear people taking tolerance breaks, and some people claim that they build up a tolerance, but it hasn't been really proven to be the case. You just might be more accustomed to things, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, and this, you mentioned, people can abuse food, and that although we don't seem to have that in, McDonald's can be a drug, and we don't seem to have that in the same category, which seems to be in error to me. So people can abuse anything, and again, that broad umbrella of drugs are bad just seems to be way too simplistic for me. You touched on an interesting thing about the fact that people would seek cannabis instead of prescription medication for pain, and it came down to mainly financial reasons, more or less.
Yeah, partial reason. I would say at the
partially.
clinic,
Okay.
I experienced that with my patients that walked into my clinic. I'm not going to claim that's true at a clinic downtown LA, right?
Sure.
I'm sure it's demographically, it changes depending on the area you're in, but I definitely experienced a lot of that within my clinic.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense, and it's interesting that this is kind of brings us into a bit of a discussion of the comparison between alcohol and cannabis. And one of the reasons I find this to be useful is because there's a couple of different reasons. One is one that you already pointed out, which it's actually rather easy to overdose and actually die off of alcohol. And on top of that, it's one of the drugs that if you stop abruptly, if you're truly addicted to alcohol, the withdrawals can actually kill you, which is crazy because there aren't a ton of drugs that are capable of doing that. So that level of addictive quality and that level of dependency that your body can, be subject to is something basically foreign to marijuana use. It's not that there's no dependency. It's not that there's ever any element of addictive quality, but because people become addicted to anything. But comparatively speaking, it's a radical difference. And yet I can go down to Walmart and pick up enough alcohol to kill me in a night, and yet I could never smoke enough marijuana to kill me. And it's one of those simple yet relevant distinctions that I think is fascinating. Another one is, at the end of the week, it would not be uncommon for you to go with your boss down to a bar and have a couple drinks, but these days, if you asked your boss if he wanted a hit off a vapor, off of a joint, that would be relatively unheard of without, there's certain exceptions, and of course it's becoming more mainstream. And that's absolutely fascinating to me that has become the reality that we live in, and specifically in a comparison to alcohol and marijuana. What do you think about that comparison between alcohol and marijuana?
I mean, I do agree with you. It is kind of ridiculous. You can go in, there's no limit on how much alcohol you can.
Yeah.
I mean, the consumption of alcohol, I don't really know of any. There are medical purposes of alcohol within a
Sure.
hospital, that sort of thing. But like the actual consumption of, there are medical uses, I'm sure, But the one that I really find strange, I mean, only because of my history with food, right, is there was a study done on, crack versus sugar, right?
Oh,
And sugar
yes.
was found to be more effective, more addictive than crack.
Yeah.
Sugar has shown no nutritional value so far. They still pump it in our kids' cereal, that is one that, like, I don't understand why sugar isn't really classified as a drug yet, because, if you read the definition of the FDA drug, sugar would qualify technically.
Yeah.
Highly addictive, no known medical purpose, right?
Yeah. I'd heard that before, but you just saying it again and just brought it back into my consciousness. Wow, that's so true.
Yeah. But, I mean, rolling a joint, the act of, like, sitting around at 420 every day, or, you form some, ritual that as a human, you add it to your routine, it could become a habitual sort of
Sure.
consumption, but not a chemical level addiction or withdrawal, There's none of that risk involved. So, I do find it odd that, like, there was a time there where cannabis, I would have never wanted my parents to find out I had used cannabis. I was 22 when I used it the first time. I grew up, my grandpa was a preacher, and we were pretty conservative. And, when I was on opiates and my aunt suggested it, I thought she was crazy because I thought it was a party drug,
Yeah.
That's, when I compare alcohol to marijuana, it's not even close to the same thing. And that's why when recreational got passed, it was a pretty upsetting day for me, actually. Pretty conflicted, right? I own a business. It's good for business. However, to me, it's a little past the line. I am happy that as a 21-year-old or over, you can walk in and buy it just like you can any other drug in a pharmacy that's over the counter. And so I do think that is good as far as an over-the-counter use of medical reasons, but, like, a party situation, I mean, it's all about the setting and the, why, the purpose, are you celebrating, or are you trying to become happy, right?
What's the intention there?
Yeah, so, don't really, anytime I hear people, I use it as anti-anxiety, I do worry a little on that, because you can pick up any habit to relieve your anxiety, right?
Sure.
Some people golf, some people swim, some people, some people consume cannabis, but anytime you're, like, consuming a drug, it does have its purpose. It's been, it's been shown for PTSD, or I'm going to screw up the letters here, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
That was an approved use here in Michigan. Anxiety, depression, and it does have its use. It just, when you're doing it without consulting with a psychologist or a doctor, and you're trying to treat yourself medically, I don't know how you could without some sort of education, some kind of insight.
Yeah.
And it's pretty common nowadays to walk into even a regular doctor's office at Bronson, Burgess, Spectrum, and find a doctor that's open to adding cannabis to your, like fish oil or anything else to your normal routine.
Yeah.
They're pretty receptive to that nowadays. There was a time when, about 10 years ago, I had a doctor reject me as a new patient because I disclosed that to him. He said, well, our relationship is pointless. I can't write you any prescriptions because you're a drug user. Right?
Wow.
So,
yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. I don't think it should get in the way of a good relationship with your doctor and, having the regimen that you feel leads to a healthier life.
Yeah. No, I hear you. One thing that I am looking forward to is when things become illegal, the ability to study them and truly find out more about what's going on, how they interact in the human body and things like that is far more limited. So the fact with larger amounts of legalization and then hopefully at one point a federal legalization, I'm hoping that the research into both long-term effects in a positive and negative light would be pursued, but then also research into more of the genuine medical benefits, because I think it's untapped in a way that we underestimate, and there's a lot of potential there that would be interesting to see in the next coming years and decades, just kind of see what is discovered in terms of uses for it. Couple quick statistics on alcohol, and then we can kind of close the door on that. I wanted to mention these just because I think it's useful, because they're kind of shocking when I was looking them up. Excessive alcohol use costs the United States economy an estimated $249 billion each year in terms of lost productivity, healthcare costs, and criminal justice expenses. That is a big number. Alcohol use is a factor in about 50% of all fatal motor vehicle crashes in the United States. 50%, that's a pretty big number. And that translates to about 88,000 people each year die from alcohol-related causes. That's both driving, that's both overuse, that's a number of different things, which it makes it the third leading preventable cause of death in the country. So that's relevant. And then finally, it's responsible globally for about 5% of all deaths, about 3 million each year. So these are some big numbers, some big statistics, and I wanted to just kind of put those out there because I think that they put alcohol in a bit of a different light if you didn't know those, and especially within this comparison when we're talking about these different substances, I think that is important to know. So you touched on a couple of the potential health benefits. I don't know how much more you would want to go into those, but you mentioned PTSD. There's some research into depression, anxiety, stuff like that. I know there is some research into nausea in terms of helping to prevent nausea, especially in people that are undergoing chemotherapy, to my knowledge. Any other benefits or any other things that you have encountered that you think are relevant to mention here?
The big thing with cancer treatment, right, is anyone that's gone through chemo can tell you that they're always on you about try to eat, right? Try to eat, try to drink, try to get rest. They'll also tell you, I'm sore all the time. I don't feel like you. I'm not hungry. I'm tired. I can't sleep, right? Think about it, the more common known side effects, the ones that everyone finds goofy of, I get really hungry. I get really hungry.
The munchies.
I got the munchies. I'm thirsty. I get really tired, right? All those side effects that typically, that'd be kind of a strange thing to want to experience, right? But when you're going through chemo and you like to get some sleep, to get a little tired and actually fall asleep, and then have the pain relief while you're asleep to be able to stay asleep is kind of amazing. I've seen that with quite a few cancer patients where they go, oh my goodness, it was the best night's sleep I've had in a long time, and just to see the relief, and I mean, that's great. Now, I would be lying to you if I told you everyone walking in and out of the dispensary is going through chemotherapy, right? Now, it does have its purpose there, but when you're comparing it to alcohol, I don't, well, sorry, you put that one to bed.
No, you can bring it up again. Okay. I just wanted to mention those. Yep. Yeah, there's definitely lots of purposes, and the different strains and the different combinations of the different, the cool thing nowadays is that the actual testing of the substance, you can get a lot of details on. What's in your cannabis. There's tons of terpenes in cannabis. That's what gives it the smell and the taste. And it's similar to aromatherapy, kind of. At Pledge, they put limonene in Pledge so that it smells like lemons, and lemons make you happy. And
the smell of lemons while you're cleaning tend to make people happier to buy Pledge, right? So that's why they put limonene in Pledge.
Interesting.
Limonene is also naturally occurring in marijuana, so like a strain like lemon skunk, you might smell like a bag of Pledge, right? And just that interactive between the terpenes, that aromatherapy, along with the different levels of CBG, CBN, CBD, THC, Delta 9, on and on, give you the different experiences. So finding the right strain, the right terpenes for the, so far the research that's been shown, you can find good charts on terpenes and how to dial it in for what's right for you.
Interesting. Okay. Explain. Give me. I'm somewhat familiar with terpenes, but give me a little bit more of an overview of those.
Terpenes are basically. I'll try to give you a link for this to put in here.
Sure. Yeah, we can put one in.
They're usually like a big wheel. There's tons of them. I couldn't even make up all the different names, right?
Yeah.
The heavy one, the ones that I like. I mean, lemon, strawberry flavor, the diesely, the fuel kind of. I'm not using the technical words on those, but there's different terpenes that, like terpene itself, the word, if you think of it, terpene sounds a lot like turpentine, right? Okay. Turpentine has a strong odor. That terpene, that root word. I'm not a Greek expert either. So
Sure.
I've been told terpene, in some root means odor, strong smell, strong taste, right? Those are the terpenes. So you got pine. There's so many different smells and tastes. Back in the day, people would tell you it just smells like skunk or hay, right?
Sure.
A lot of that had to do with the actual cultivation, the drying process, the curing process, how you store it. The terpenes just get ruined if you don't do it correctly. Over the last 20 years, I'd say the quality of the product has definitely increased just by, the education of cultivating the plant itself and drying it and harvesting it. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, no, that helps to frame it a little bit better. Yeah, there's quite a wide variety. Yeah, and one of the cool things that you pointed about legalization is like, you actually know what you're getting now. You can like the level of quality has just skyrocketed, and the price has gone way down. And the risk of potentially there being something laced there, or you smoking a completely different strain than the one advertised is basically evaporated if you're getting it from a dispensary. And that's a. Is that? Oh no, you're good. Is that overall true? Would you say?
Yeah. I mean, nowadays the cool thing is they do test it. When you said laced, right? That does come into mind. Like, I always thought that was a silly situation, almost like, inspect all your kids' candy for razor blades before you let them eat it after trick or treat. How many razor blades has anyone ever found in the trick or treat candy? Right? Okay. It's kind of the same thing. Marijuana.
With marijuana.
As far as a black market drug goes, right? Marijuana has always been at the low end of that spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. So the intent of somebody to lace it with something else or cut it in with something else to give you basically a bigger bang for your buck just doesn't financially make sense.
Okay.
To me. So like that rumor of be careful buying it because someone would intentionally lace it is sort of true. And I'll tell you why I think it is true. Really not laced per se, like intentionally. Okay. Like I went to buy marijuana and they put cocaine in it or something, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's happening. However, I do think a lot of the people that are growing in their basement using, ornamental flower fertilizers and stuff, these residual heavy metals and, things like that get into it. And that does affect you negatively. You have some pesticides that are known to be, carcinogenic, and they stay around a long time on an ornamental plant because it's not made to consume in your body, right? Yeah. With the legal market, they test for, there's a whole banned list of pesticides and products that you cannot use, and they test for, even neem oil you can't use. In some countries, they use that as mouthwash, but here it's shown as a carcinogen, so you're not allowed to even use that, which is chrysanthemum oil, basically, and shown to be highly effective against mites, but it's also shown to be a neurotoxin, so you don't really want any of that in your ganja.
Yeah, fair
Try to
enough.
use much different words here.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah, no, that's good to know. Yeah, and I knew in terms of, comparatively speaking to other substances, marijuana, being laced was a bit of a misnomer, but there was the important point about like quality and the assurance of knowing exactly what you're getting is quite important. So that's one of the benefits there. So.
Especially, my dad's generation, the stories were, he'd buy it by the finger in a baggie. So one finger, you're looking at a baggie, one finger was $10, two fingers was $20, three, four.
Okay.
They'd measure it by the finger. It would come from a brick from Mexico, right? Big outdoor brick of weed, and it had a bunch of seeds and stems in it, right? And I heard these stories, but, my dad never consumed when I was a kid. I was not raised around this at all, right?
Yep.
I did hear stories about it, and I always thought, that's a weird thing. But the quality, right? Nowadays, there are no seeds in this stuff. The genetics, anytime you have a crop where you're getting a high dollar for it, you see a lot of science and a lot of dollars being invested back into it. As far as greenhouse equipment, all the kind of equipment that you used to cultivate with, I don't think you would actually be able to afford it in a standard greenhouse where you grow with cannabis, right? Because it's so dialed in to this one crop, and it's still silly to me that it brings in, as high of a dollar as it does compared to green beans or, hydroponic tomatoes or anything else. It grows pretty easy. There's a lot in the state. It's at an all-time low. It's never been safer or more accessible.
Interesting.
You're always left with this question of balance. Like, is that really a good thing for my kids that this is now more accessible and being looked at as safer? There was a day back in the 1940s where doctors were prescribing cigarettes, right? So you just never know until the research is done and a few years pass by. But I think what you said earlier about legalization leading to more education and in the meantime, don't prosecute people until it's shown to be bad for you, okay?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. Good point. On the legalization topic, so you said it was 2007 medical marijuana in Michigan, is that correct?
Yep. 2007.
Yep. And then just recently here in what was it?
I'll say it's 17 or 18. I think we got our license in 2018.
Oh, okay.
So I think
I guess it was farther along than I realized.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
politics, it takes a long time. Even after Michigan decided, it took several years. Even during the medical years. I got pulled over when Charlie was 6 months old. I got pulled over and I had 12 ounces in my trunk and got arrested that night just because the police officer didn't realize the rules. And he was a new police officer, eyeballing how much was there. And it was pounds of weed. And I had to go to St. Joe County that night.
Oh, jeez, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I almost got out of it. But then they passed a recreational act the next day, and Holly encouraged me to go get licensed, which I was taking like two, it was a whiplash almost. Okay, I'm getting out. They passed an act. Okay, I'm getting back in. So.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So the I've heard some horror stories about people that are in jail for possession of a couple grams of marijuana, and they've been in jail for decades at this point. And it really is one of those things that is just quite sad to hear those stories. Where I believe there's even states where they're in the process of legalization, or it has been legalized, and these people are still in jail. And you can imagine a situation where if it does become federally legal, which seems likely at one point, although it's unclear how fast that will happen due to our lovely political state. You can imagine a situation where, we would have had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people serving, countless years in prison for something that then becomes legal later on. And it's one of those things that just makes me sad and frankly upset that that's been the state of things. Do you think it's likely that within the next 5 years we get legalization federally? What do you think about that?
It feels like in this world we all think, you're about 3 or 5 years away.
Yeah, you keep thinking that.
That's been going on for 20 years now. So.
Oh wow. Yeah.
For me, anyways, I figured 99 California passed. You look at 2007 when Michigan jumped in medically. It was already close to about a third of the states at the time. So,
yeah.
You're talking 2007. Here we are, 2023. Moved up here in I moved here in 2007 because of the act. I kind of joke around. I was a political refugee from Indiana when I moved up here. Yeah, when they passed the act, that was forever ago. And here we are, 2023. I look around and it's like, wow, where's the time gone? But federal just hasn't happened yet, right?
Yeah.
I will say, out of all the states that are recreational and medical, federal did come out saying that if your state has rules, that there's expungement stuff now, right?
Okay.
And the ruling, the whole idea behind it's not a ruling, it's like I forget exactly what it was, but the states were supposed to conduct that on people and relieve them of those charges, right? However, there was just nobody, especially here in Michigan, for sure, who were in touch with Michigan, there was nobody at the time that had just marijuana charges, right? Marijuana, to me, it all became illegal in the first place for racial reasons. Back when Ginslinger, made it a criminal activity. It was racially driven, and with the hippie movement and stuff, it's a strong odoured substance, right? If it's in a car, you can smell it.
You can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. So logically, if there's a strong odor substance, and me as a police officer, that gives me just cause to search. I smell marijuana. That's you can get a warrant on the side of the road. Back then to search a vehicle based on the smell of marijuana. Drug dogs were trained, right? So to me, marijuana was always one of those things that I think everybody kind of knew it wasn't as harmful as the government, the propaganda tried to paint it to become, right?
Yep.
But it was almost like a joke. The people that could afford to get in a little trouble, they could afford to get arrested, pay a lawyer, walk away with no charges. The other people that are already being, oppressed on some level to catch a marijuana charge on top of, found a weapon in your car and it led to a fight and this and that. Now you're in prison for a few years on a few charges, and it all started with the odor of marijuana. And statistically, they do say that everybody is committing a felony at any point in time, and if you consciously commit a felony, you're committing two, and it only takes 3 to go away for a really long time. So it's never a good idea to be committing felonies, legally speaking, and for your freedom.
Fair enough.
Good
advice.
The idea that, the idea of how it became illegal, how it's been applied to different people of different social classes over the years, it's just about time that it got rid of. So I am looking forward to at least decriminalization on a federal level for all states. But there's going to be some states that lag behind. Indiana was actually the last one to pass. Prohibition. What am I trying to say? Repeal prohibition. So when I was sitting in Indiana, I saw Michigan pass Cannabis. I thought, better go now because it'll be about another decade or so before it passes.
Yeah. Huh. Long time. Yeah, it's an interesting process of how that happens and the cultural movements and the shift, and it's slow, and then we think it's happening, and then it isn't, and then we get our hopes up, and then it's not. And then 50, is it over 50% of states now are legal
Yeah.
medically, at least.
Yeah, over 50% are medical.
Yeah.
I know we're still not quite halfway on the recreational.
Okay.
I would say that's my biggest. If I had to find something really good that I really, really liked about the recreational movement, it's a quicker way to decriminalization of it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Okay. Another topic within the legal sphere is driving. And there's no doubt that marijuana does in fact affect your driving. I would also say this, that I have people that I know, and I chastise them as I should, but I do have people that I know that drive around high and have been doing it for 5-6 years and have never had a single incident. Now, that isn't evidence that it's okay, but it is evidence that it is a different drug than alcohol in that context. But more specifically, one of the tricky problems with the driving aspect is we have a fairly accurate test for alcohol, the breathalyzer. It can measure with a decent degree of accuracy how intoxicated you truly are, and at the spot it can determine how competent you are going to be at driving. The problem with marijuana is that it can stay in your system for much, much longer than alcohol, and tests like a typical drug test that you'd get if you're applying for a job can be in the span of months in terms of it's still in your system. And if you do a hair test, it can be in the span of years. So that's one of the tricky aspects here of how do you test someone if you suspect that they're high while driving, with that in mind, because you can't administer what would be considered a typical drug test. So I think what we're probably going to have to do is design tests that make more sense. But one of the most important tests that I think will be used is just your classical field sobriety test, in terms of the walking on a straight line and the balancing and all that fun stuff that you have to do. But on a practical level, that does make a lot of sense, because it's meant to test cognitive ability and motor skills and all those things important for driving. But it's an interesting point of, like, we don't really have a test for marijuana in the same way that we do alcohol. And it's partially because of the substance and the way that it interacts with your body, but it's also just partially because it's just a different substance. It's just a different game. So, what are your thoughts there? I mean, I'm assuming you probably would be on the camp of not recommending driving high, as I would be. But yeah, what are your thoughts there? How do you think we're going to tackle that?
So, again, if I was going to buy cannabis at a pharmacy, and I was imagining what kind of stickers a pharmacy would put on the outside of this bottle, right? You've gotten bottles where it says, "Do not drive, within hours of this," or "Take food with this substance," or "Wait 3 hours after your last meal before you take this pill." To me, it would say something like, "Don't operate heavy machinery, including driving, until you're accustomed with the effects of it," right?
Okay.
Microdosing with cannabis, taking a few grams a day as a vitamin kind of thing, you typically are not inebriated beyond the point of, you have to become accustomed to how it reacts with your own body, right?
Real quick on that.
Yeah.
I've actually not really heard of that being a common thing, microdosing. Is that normally in edible form? People will microdose?
Yeah. However, I would say if there was a smoking microdoser, that would be me.
Okay.
I use a vape pen. I use it probably 3 times a day-ish, right? And it's about a 3-second hit every time. It's not. I don't get stoned, I would say. I use it in the way I would use, any other prescribed drug, really. It's not like I have a rough night and I go home and I go have 5 marijuanas and
5
marijuanas. go tear up the town or whatever.
Tear up the town. Oh, it's funny.
It's a daily kind of thing. There are research. They're researching different ways to give a side of the road kind of test for like recent usage, and it would show up in your saliva. It would show up differently than metabolized cannabinoid.
Okay.
So, like, when you take a workplace 11-panel drug screening, they're testing for metabolized delta-9 THC, which means it has passed through your body, right? And it's on its way out. If you just put marijuana in your pea cup at your don't do this, but
Sure.
if you go to get your new job and you were to just drop a bud in there, it would not test positive. It has not been metabolized by your body, right? So to look for traces around your lips for non-metabolized delta-9 THC, where it's been, you've recently smoked and there's a roach in your car or, something like that, I do think, tell you the truth, I don't know how most people would feel, but, I've been at like a July 4th celebration, you're sitting there watching fireworks with your kids, and then the next thing you know, the guy next to you is smoking a joint, and you're, what's going on? Have a little social, respect for what's going on around you. Not everybody appreciates a big cloud of smoke.
Yeah, true.
So, same thing there is just, when I'm driving around and I see someone with a bowl on their lap and they're sharing a bowl in the car with their friends and they're driving, even down here around Western, it's just kind of like, why? Don't you have somewhere?
Yeah.
Don't you live somewhere? I don't know why the need to drive around and consume or hurry and get in your car to drive somewhere if you're going to be stoned or drunk. Same kind of. If that's the kind of decisions you make, I mean, the future's not that bright, anyways. I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree.
But they would measure it in nanograms per liter of your blood if they were looking for metabolized THC.
Okay.
And a lot of times, they do still test you for that sometimes when they take you into jail. You can reject it. If you reject it, it's almost a surefire way to lose a license. So most lawyers would say, if you're arrested, just comply. Let them collect their samples. Just because THC is in your bloodstream, it doesn't mean that you were inebriated during the time of the incident, whatever happened. The big fallout, the big thing on marijuana too, especially during the days of medical without recreational, was you had the caregiver days where people were growing in their house. The police, they call it policing for profit is the slang, but it's called seizure and forfeiture laws. And it comes from maritime, finding boats with, abandoned or criminal activity. The police can seize these boats, and because they may not be a citizen, this idea of this seized boat and the seized property may have been in the use of it may have been used in the event of a crime, even though no person committed this crime. These things could have aided in a crime that happened. Does that?
Yeah, no, I tracked it. It's just weird logic.
It is weird logic, and so this carried over into state police, and this is a thing. Seizure forfeiture is basically if the police claim that they witnessed a crime through your window of your house, right? They could go in and say, everyone's arrested. We're seizing your house. We're seizing your cars. We're seizing your money. We're seizing everything inside your house, right? And this would happen a lot during the caregiver days of, well, we don't know that they had cards. They're not registered or whatever, so we're going to seize the house, seize the cars until they either, and the way most municipalities work on this is you've got to put 5% of the value of whatever they take during the seizure into an account. So if they take your house, if you live in a $125,000 house, right, and you got to come up with 5%, you got to come up with $6,000 to have them hold on to your house until the trial.
That's insane.
Insane. So in the meantime, they're allowed to sell it at auction if you don't pay the bond.
So corrupt.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's enticement. But logically, it also, you would think at a first glance, well, don't commit crimes. That is something that I would impulsively want to say is quit committing crimes. But at the same time, you don't realize it until it happens to you that, like I said, I was arrested. They took my car. They took 2 guitars that were in the trunk. I was playing at church. I had to borrow a guitar for a couple months. They took my work laptop. They also happened to take the 12 ounces that, were suspected to be illegal, that were found to not be illegal. But I was missing my car for 6 months. I had to come up with like $5,000 to secure my laptop, the car, the stuff, on top of all this, just to go through all that. They dropped my charges the next day. I was released from jail. They found my cards in the trunk of the car. They dropped all the criminal charges against me. But it took about that long to actually get my stuff back, because under these rules, you may not have committed a crime, but your stuff could have been used in the the act of the crime that was not committed by a person, but this crime happened, even though there's no one that's been found guilty of it. Your stuff could still be guilty.
Huh.
Yeah. So we actually ended up suing them at a state level and winning, and we changed the rules of St. Joe County to where it's a lot harder for them to be able to do it. Yeah. But this is my little corner there. But I mean, the case that was brought to me, the lawyer that represented me at the time said, we can just walk away with their stuff or take them to state court, because what they're doing is actually, in excess of what the state allows them to do. They were not just charging 5%. They're also charging a surcharge of like another $2,000 or something.
Oh, okay. So it's even worse in some sense.
Yeah, and the case the lawyer encouraged me. He was wanting to take it to state court, right? That's kind of what they do. The use case there, the scenario he presented to me was, say the single mom cashes her paycheck or her tax check, right? End of the year, you get your tax check, you cash it. You're driving. Police pull you over, find a roach in your ashtray. They take your cash. They take your cash, your car, right? Where is she going to come up with? She's already carrying around her cash because she doesn't have a checking account. I'm not trying to stereotype anybody. I'm just saying, you get the idea.
This scenario happens. Yep.
Yeah. Your car is not even worth trying to go out and find the money. In the meantime, they're taking your car, taking the cash, everything you got. Who did it really help? I mean, it's not worth that much, but in their life, it's all the difference. It's getting to work. It's having a paycheck. It's, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, try to talk about that a little bit. Seizure forfeiture. It's still wrong. I mean, it's still a thing. It's just now marijuana is not, the odor of marijuana being present is no longer a good reason to walk into your house, which is a step forward.
Huh. Man, that is crazy. I honestly didn't even know about that. So it's crazy. Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That seems obviously corrupt to me in a way that's astounding. And your little point about not committing crimes, like, I'm with you. In general, it seems like a fairly good policy in life. Of course, part of the problem with that is it assumes that the crime that you'd be committing was in fact, the legal basis for it being a crime was justifiable and logical. And the problem is there's certain crimes, as we're discussing somewhat with marijuana at this point, which that basis for them being crimes is questioned. So you run into tricky territory with that, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Doesn't mean you should in fact commit the crime. So interesting.
And over the years, I mean, if you look at centuries of evolution of legal systems, right? To me, it's just amazing of the silly stuff that we've come up with to like inflict on each other.
Yeah.
To be able to say, hey, I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to lock you up. Or I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to press you into a state of different than me to where you can't have what I have. I've never really... The older I get, the more I think about the legal system. It's just not good. I mean, it has to be there. Without it, it would be worse. But
yeah, we can't have anarchy.
It will never be perfect.
Yeah, and yet, there's so many elements to it which are corrupt. You brought up an interesting point about like just leaving people alone, and this is one that within the whole marijuana discussion, I think is important because it's one of those. It's like I heard this joke once. It's like the biggest victim of marijuana is like Cheetos bags. Like people, it's like, versus like some of the victims of alcohol are, wives or kids or, families. Like it truly is a different, not to bring that comparison up again, but we're talking about completely different things here. And with drugs and with anything here is this, I find this concept very attractive. If I'm not harming you or causing you, any direct harm in any way, what gives you the right to come in and tell me what I can and cannot do? And within the legal system, this is, this has an obvious effect. But it's one of those things that I wish more people would get behind, that mentality of live and let live to a certain degree. That just because your neighbor is smoking a joint in his backyard doesn't mean you have the right to go over there and put him in jail. And this, I think a lot of our polarization, a lot of our conflict in the U.S. today and just culture in general would not cease, but simply be reduced dramatically if people would subscribe to that leave people alone side of things. So, what do you think about that?
You always have the guy in the neighborhood, right?
The guy in the neighborhood.
You know who I'm talking about. Like, it's just, yeah. It's tough. Like, it's tough to live next to each other, right? So, yeah, I try to live by that. I was raised by that. I mean, that sounds very much like my dad would say. I mean, his big phrases to me were always go with the flow and live and let live, right? Like, I always thought, if I'm not hurting you, don't hurt me. Hopefully we get along and like to hang out with each other. But nowadays, I mean, I'll say in my neighborhood, we've gotten to know our neighbors pretty well. There's a cluster of us. This is a side story, I guess, but they have backyard bar, which is kind of cool because they all have younger kids. So we kind of take turns sitting in each other's backyard, and we don't go anywhere. We just, we all have kids that are in bed. So we have baby monitors out, and we're all sitting around. Most of them are drinking. But my neighbor to the back of me is the buyer for Red Bud Roots, and I'm at Kalamazoo, so we sit there and we partake in cannabis while the rest of them are drinking. And I mean, if I was gonna try to push my own beliefs on it, would be quit drinking. I'd rather just everybody be smoking, but I'm also not trying to push that on them, and they don't really push it on me, and it's nice nowadays. At least in my neighborhood right now. But yeah, kind of, you don't like someone putting a pink flamingo in their front yard, or whatever the thing is that people get irritated about. If you want an entertaining night, just go to go to your local municipality to a board meeting sometime and listen to those public opinions and all the little issues that they have with their neighbors and this and that. Marijuana, when the recreational passed, that was a big thing that came up at the township here. Was like, if I can smell it from my porch, is that not really intrusive on my space because your odors are now coming into my space? And the township was talking about getting a smellometer.
Really?
So that
I didn't know
they
that.
actually make these so that you can detect odors. Part of our rules of licensing here is that we have to keep our building under negative pressure with carbon scrubbed air, so that if the door opens, the odor of marijuana does not get out. Even though we're in an industrial zone and the water treatment plant is right down the street. It's all day. Like,
seems a bit one-sided.
I would think we'd get
rule-wise.
subsidized to release terpenes into the air
come
out the
on,
front
man.
door of the
Come on.
dispensary. So, but no, I mean, yeah. Nowadays, too, though, you're allowed to grow 12 plants in your backyard. So now you have, people, a 12-plant garden outside, I'll say. These plants, even in Michigan, get to be 8-10 feet tall and 6 to 8 feet around.
Yeah.
To have 12 of those in your backyard looks like a Christmas tree farm, at the end of summertime, and it does create quite an odor. So
It's true. It is a serious concern. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but at the same time, an odor never really hurt anybody. And if there was a skunk in a tree, what are you going to do about it? Just because, some guy's growing it in their backyard, and say you don't like the smell of roses, and that's what they grow. It's a strange times, right?
Strange times. It's true.
Yeah.
That was the title of a Joe Rogan special. And
I
I thought it was very, very true. And that was several years ago now. So I mean, it's stranger times now, I suppose. But
yeah. Another big thing going on was like people were growing in their house, and then people would break in to steal it. Right?
Yeah.
This happened in the township 2 or 3 times. People died where the homeowner that was actually like growing in their home, and this person broke in unarmed, and because this person snuck up on him with a shovel and bashed him in the back of the skull, killed him. It does bring up the reason why dispensaries are kind of nice nowadays, because it's available, it's under camera, people are checked, that kind of stuff. It's not an at-home business with lots of cash coming out of the door.
true.
That sort of thing. So, you're allowed to protect yourself if somebody's trying to harm you, but it's never a good idea to try to hurt somebody just because you're trying to take their property.
This is true. Yeah.
I wouldn't be too happy if I heard someone broke into my house.
Fair enough. Yeah, you shouldn't be. That's fair enough. Okay. Yeah, so there are a lot of nuances here. Lots of stuff to dig into. I'm running out of brain, so how about we?
Okay.
How about any last topics you wanted to touch on, or any closing thoughts, or anything like that?
No, I mean the world's huge on this subject. So if you ever want to talk to lawyers or doctors or something, we're pretty, we all get along in the industry. I mean, it's a pretty small circle, really. So, just let me know.
Cool. Yeah. So, hey, thanks for coming on. I hope anyone that was listening and made it this far got some good insight and learned some things. It's cool to hear your perspective, and you're definitely in that world, and you have a unique personal perspective, and I appreciate you coming on and spending the time. So thanks.
No problem. Thanks. Good talking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.